Media for the politically aware.
Welcome to Sacred Matrix, a divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness, with your host, Janet Kira Lessin and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Together, we transform the world.
And now, here are your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
All right, we have a little technical difficulties here. Let me get Janet back. All right. Why ain't it picking up Janet now?
Hi, it's
there we go.
Letting me pick up on the.
You're live now.
Oh.
And
say that again.
You are live, and Joanne has joined us.
Okay, we're live and Joanne is here. Okay, thank you everybody. Aloha and welcome to Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Sorry for the little technical things here. We're running late, but we're here. We're glad to be here. I'm your host, Janet Kira Lessin, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lessin, and our guest today is JoAnn Richards. And I'm going to let Joanne tell you a little bit about herself. She is let me pull up her bio real quick here. Maybe I can't. Okay, we'll just, Dr. Lessin will be with us just in a minute here. And JoAnn Richards, are you here?
I am. Can you hear me?
Hi.
Hi, dear.
Tell our listeners who you are and a little bit about your story, because I'm
Sure.
at a loss to find your bio right now.
All right.
Take it away.
Well, hello, everybody. I am JoAnn Richards. I'm executive director of a nonprofit called Earth Defense Headquarters. I am based in Northern California, just north of San Francisco. And one of the primary topics we cover is little known history, a lot of military history, cryptozoology, magical arts, cool things like that. Stuff you're not going to hear in the mainstream media and at your normal school. So we get into what a lot of people think are weird topics, but I don't think so. I've been doing this since about 2004, as far as going to different conferences and stuff. And a lot of the what am I trying to say? A lot of the details I talk about for the history is related to the military and what the military did they've done with UFOs and aliens, what aliens are like, and space battles and on-Earth battles and conferences with aliens and the secret space program, because when you get right down to it, that's what that's what my husband and my father-in-law did for their whole military careers. So why am I here?
Right.
Because go ahead.
The space program is really hot right now, so we want to know a lot about that. Go ahead, continue with your bio.
Yeah. I was going to say, and the reason I'm here, because by day I'm a bookkeeper, and I have a huge bookkeeping practice here in California with clients all over the world, basically. And by night and in all my spare moments, I run this nonprofit and I go around speaking at conferences and things, because my husband was framed for a murder in 1982 he had nothing to do with. He was off on a mission, but we know it's to keep him out of the hair of the New World Order and the shadow government people and, all the people that are trying to run the world behind the scenes now. So he's been in prison since 1982. Well over 30 years. And I met him while he was in prison. We got married in prison. We're coming up on our 15th wedding anniversary. So we've been together almost 20 years. It's a weird, strange life, and I wouldn't recommend it to everybody, but he and I do very well together. So there we are.
Yes, you have a very, very unique marriage, but it's a
Yes,
good
we
one.
do.
I've heard a lot about your interactions.
Yes.
Okay. So, Sasha, would you like to say anything? He just joined us.
Oh, yeah. So
Hi,
Mark
Sasha.
Richards is a huge hero. Hi. I just this person, Mark, is a tremendous gift to humanity. He was part of the rescue of the women in Dulce, where with Onizuka, our hero of Hawaii. He's been on a number of secret missions and protecting us, keeping us alive. He's a real hero, and he's just put in jail because he knows too much.
Thank you. And I don't know what you want to talk about today, but I will say that I just came back from Dulce, and I just spoke at a conference there, and it was a wonderful event. So,
well, let's start with that. You
all right.
presented at the Dulce conference, and that's where this heroic rescue led by Mark was. What year was that? Like 79 or something?
It was fall of 1979. It's basically the same time period that Phil Schneider was probably there, but Phil Schneider was not part of the military thing. And this conference was held at the Wild Horse Casino. That's basically the only hotel in Dulce. Dulce is a lovely, very small town in northern New Mexico, about 45. Well, it's close to the Colorado border, apparently. And it's on the Hickory Apache Reservation. The Apache people were absolutely wonderful. They're my new best friends. I just love them to death. The locals there have regular UFO sightings and Bigfoot sightings. So this conference was a combination of UFO and Bigfoot information, and one guy was speaking about things that are on the moon and pictures he knows that have been things have been stripped out of the pictures because of what the government doesn't want us to see. And several locals were speaking. I was the only one speaking about what had actually happened at the base. But that was a remarkable, and they've already invited me back next year so I can say even more, because I didn't say everything I know, but it was just there were there were well over 100 people, maybe 150. The room was packed for Saturday, all day Saturday, and then not as many came back for Sunday, but it was just a wonderful event. And the weather's really dry there, but this time of year, and it was hot, but I loved my experience there. So I got to talk about, my husband helped edit a report that went to the Joint Chiefs of Staff in December of 2001, because by then a lot of information had been leaked out by researchers and various people about what had been going on at this base. And as many people know or don't know, aliens and our government allowed different alien groups to build a base in New Mexico there and do like scientific and genetic experiments on human abductees, and they got into mind control experiments and breeding experiments, and that was going on. I think I said in my talk, they probably started kidnapping people for that like in the 50s, but by the 70s there were thousands and thousands of victims there, and they were doing horrible, horrible things to them. And so the military kind of had been, and the sad thing is there were people in our government going there and participating in the horrible orgies and torture. But the military was pardon me?
So what horrible things were they doing there? You said orgies, so they were using some people as sex slaves, is that right?
Right. They were using people as sex slaves for orgies. They were experimenting on the women, like to create hybrid creatures. A lot of the aliens can no longer, or they have trouble reproducing because of the environmental, conditions on their planets and things. So a lot of them will use preferably white human young females as surrogate wombs to impregnate them and reproduce their type of young. They also used several women as, basically milking machines, because a lot of aliens like human milk, and they use it as part of this nutritional solution they create. That's also part of the reason for the cattle mutilations, because they were testing to see if maybe, I don't know if they used just the blood or maybe some of the organs from, cows and other animals in that area to create this nutrition solution, because they would have to absorb it through their skin apparently instead of just drink it. So there have been stories like with Costello, who brought out lots of information out. Pardon me?
Hold on.
Yep.
Hold on. We want to
we want to know a little bit about are they Greys? Are they
reptilians?
Okay. Who are they?
Okay. The Greys ran it. They were like the managers. There were reptoids there. There were different Nordic types. The Dracos might have been there. There were, I think, definitely by 1979, there were 37 species that were coming and going. Some of them could get there by their own spacecraft. Some, came to participate in the experiments. Some just wanted to eat people. Some just wanted to be part of the orgies. And by 1979, they figured there were at least 18,000 aliens there. So a variety of
you said that they could use human females as a womb.
Right. A surrogate
for their,
right.
And would it be the offspring would look like them?
Yes, I believe so. And yes, as far as I know. And they were also experimenting with various hybrid type creatures, maybe part human, part whatever they were. And I think the report also talks about them maybe it's like the stories are that there were like large tanks or vats with, like they were creating.
You're breaking up a little bit. I'm not sure what to do, but just to let you know, we might have to have you back up a couple times.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I get excited. I'm too close. I don't know all the, you hear some rumors from what maybe Costello brought out and what other researchers thought was there. But as far as I know, they were, I think it was a combination of, I don't know if they were just experimenting with hybrid type creatures, part human, part whatever the alien was, or they were using the women as, surrogate wombs just to reproduce their own kind, things like that. And some rumors that have come out of there are some really weird things got created there. So,
well, we have a report from John Titor the second, and he says that he was a clone that was created at the Dulce facility, a human clone.
Oh, wow.
And that he he was awakened.
Super soldier.
He's a super soldier, and he was awakened, I think it was 78 or 79, 78 maybe, or might even be earlier, like 76. I have to re-listen to his interview. But he was awakened, fully enlisted in the military. His physical form was about 28 or something like that, and they had imprinted him with memories of a life before that, of a family, and he knew everything what he had to do regarding his duties and responsibilities. And so he was awakened, and it's like, okay, it's time to go down to the mess hall and have your dinner. And he was part of a 4-person team. They were all awakened the same day, 2 men and 2 women. So it's a fascinating story, but it does correlate with the information that you have about Dulce being an experimental facility.
Right. And one of the things that maybe I hadn't remembered from when I used to talk about this, because I have tried not to talk about it much for a long time, but is that they were, I guess one of the things that got the military really bent on doing this rescue mission is that they found out that, the plan, excuse me, was to start cloning humans. And part of it, I think, was for breeding like sex slaves. And it sounds like part of it was for creating a slave race. So that sounds exactly like what you're talking about.
Well, what John says is that the quality of students coming out of high school had been degrading over the years because of extensive drug use, and they're trying to make us a dysfunctional society, and it's working, right? So in order to have the quality of super soldiers, not only do they have enhanced genetic capabilities, but they're also they follow directions easy. They have a higher IQ. They're not, they're clean. They're not addicted to drugs. They're healthier. So they, what John was saying is, their plans are to only use about 20 to 30% of the general population as recruits. The rest will be these super soldiers that are cloned. And that might be in place now. We don't know, especially for the secret space program.
Okay, so then the government, so our government was complicit in this, and then so when Mr. Carter came in and learned about this, that's when Mark's account really starts kicking in about that what happened.
Well, the Mark and the secret space program people, in August, they had been out in space doing a space mission, and they beat the aliens, so they came back and were very cocky. And our remote viewers here, had been tracking what was going on at Dulce, and at some point they realized how bad things had gotten. So, number one, you have these cocky astronauts or space pilots or whatever they want to call themselves, have come back from a battle, and now they, hear about all these women in trouble, so they have to go rescue the women. So President Carter, he signed an authorization for them to organize it. Then he basically sounds like he backed off because he was not fully aware of the operation once it was taking place. These guys, much to the chagrin of the elites in the shadow government, you had a small or a certain faction of the military, from Delta Force, from Navy SEALs, from Air Force Special Ops, Army Rangers. You had handpicked people who went in without official orders and ignoring the elites who didn't want them to go in there and disrupt things. And they had a teams that would go in by air, and I'll explain this in a minute. Some went in by the trains, the underground tunnel system that goes there, and some went in through a water intake area. And basically they went in, they rescued 3,500 women and children. They captured 2 or 3 alien craft. They blew up a major portion of the base. And many of them, I think 66 people, this is the famous, account that 66 of our guys died. Mark was wounded. His aircraft was damaged, but they still got out. And they were also helped by our friends, the Raptors, at the end, but they were in and out. Within an hour of the attack beginning, they were told okay, it's time to get out now. And it's 72 minutes and 14 seconds they were out from the time they entered. So, people question us is well, you can't be really telling the truth because he's not telling us, what the walls looked like and what the floors looked like. Well, excuse me, but if you're in a combat situation and you're trying to rescue as many people as possible, you don't care what the floor looks like. And they were in and out in just a little over an hour. So,
Joanne, I think I want to know whether I'm confused or whether I got it right. At a critical moment, I thought that Mark had said that a reptilian who was their ally brought his craft and assisted.
Yes, that's what I just said. So our friend the Raptors, which is Raptors.
Is a raptor the same?
Raptors are reptilian, but they're not Dracos, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, they're not Dracos. They're the ones I talk about a lot, and they originated here on Earth. They look like velociraptors, and they are allies to our military. So they did come in. I don't know if it was just one of their ships or more than one, but I know that our friend Prince Naga came in and helped towards the end of that mission, so that our guys would get out fairly safely. And yes,
Wow.
Onizuka was on that mission, and so was David Griggs, and so was Ron McNair, and they were 3 young astronauts who had just been with him in the space mission, a couple months before that. And Onizuka and McNair died in a shuttle accident, and David Griggs was killed in a car accident.
So it seems like they were killed for acting ultra vires beyond any authorization. That's the conclusion I come to.
Say that again?
I think they were murdered.
Oh, of course those guys were murdered. Yes. And many people that Mark has worked with have been murdered. Yes. The shuttle accident was no accident, and David Griggs' car accident was no accident. Yeah. Definitely.
Wow.
Yeah. And I know,
recently,
people.
Let me interject something to
Sure.
kind of verify what you're talking about. We interviewed Gloria Hawker, and she said that her husband was at White Sands, but they were underground. She was taken underground because she's a lifelong experiencer, and they had her come into these facilities. She saw Carter and Reagan in these underground facilities, having full awareness of everything that was going on with extraterrestrials, and extraterrestrials walking around and being, so people are saying that Carter and Reagan didn't know, but they had full awareness of everything. So we're getting some validation on that from other people that have seen them. So
the presidents always know.
Rescue.
He let it go. It sounds like with a plausible deniability.
Yes. Yes.
But he didn't acknowledge the details so that he couldn't get in trouble for it.
Right. So
because we're working against, what you really see here is that we're working against a entrenched deep state, and these are some real patriots that were trying to save people.
Right. And this was an operation. And yes, I mean, just like Kennedy. I mean, Kennedy was fully aware of the aliens. He authorized a conference when Mark was a kid, but he couldn't attend it, or he didn't attend it. But he was always fully aware of the aliens. All the presidents, in my opinion, are aware of the aliens. They just, can't acknowledge that to the public. But they are often attending meetings that aliens are at. So, it's like one of the first things they're told about when they get into office. But yes, Carter knew about it. But it's kind of like, you authorize it and then tell the military, okay, you go do what you need to do, type of thing. I don't want to know. Just go do it.
Right.
Go take care of it.
Yeah.
So, and Mark used to have.
Obama told the girl, if I told you the truth, I'd have to kill you.
Right. Exactly. Well, that's, in my opinion, that's why Kennedy was killed. So, other people may have other opinions, but I think a lot of us have that opinion. But, Mark used to have higher clearances than the presidents ever had. So, just saying.
Right. The president doesn't need to know all the information that Mark knew in order to do his job.
No, nor, do they need to know everything like that the Joint Chiefs of Staff might know, that kind of stuff.
Right. All right, so go ahead, continue. Sorry for the interruption, but I just wanted to interject these points before.
So if you could, what really is exciting, I don't know if it's how fresh it is in your mind, but if you could slow down and say how this battle took place and how 6 Americans got killed. Wow.
Well, they didn't describe that exactly. I will say there were, and I have my master copy, but let's just say that the mission commander over the whole thing was somebody named Brigadier General Adderholt. My father-in-law was the commander-in-chief of the mission. Mark, my husband, was commander of one of the attack teams. So like I said, you had people going in different ways. And Mark, for example, one team went in on a cargo train in the underground tunnel system and tube train system that's there. And the SEALs went in probably another way. Mark actually was flying an experimental craft called an X-22, which is a vertical takeoff craft that what has morphed into our current day Osprey helicopters, or I don't know if they're considered helicopters, but are Osprey. and he'd had 12 hours of training on it. And then the military was tracking a UFO that was going to the base. And what they did at the base is, I mean, I relearned because I had to reread a lot of this to, do the talk, but apparently there's like over 100 exits, out of the base or in and out of the base. But the aircraft, they had an entrance like probably on the side of the mesa or whatever, covered with dirt, and also a holographic image so that you wouldn't see that there's like doors there. I think maybe now it's covered with dirt, but used to be like two big doors, and the doors would open and their craft would come in. Well, we tracked one of their ingoing craft, and Mark was right behind it with this X-22, and maybe there were some support craft behind him, but he went in like basically right behind it or right on top of it as it was going in, so they couldn't close the doors. And then you start firing and securing the landing port, and then they blasted the doors open, I believe, and went into the main hull, the main control place. And I don't know if they went down. I mean, it sounds like they went down to a lot of the different levels, because the more horrific things were happening in lower levels. But like I said, he doesn't necessarily describe inch by inch, minute by minute the combat, and he doesn't describe which guys are dead or whatever. And it's not just him. The report I have is something that got edited for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, so I know he helped edit it, but he's not the sole person responsible for this report. But like I said, it was pretty nasty combat. He was wounded, but they captured some craft and they rescued as many people as they could. And the sad thing is, there's so many more victims that were there, and the men got in there and they discovered, probably, okay, there's way more aliens than we thought. There's probably way more victims than we thought. This whole underground tunnel train system is more extensive than we thought. And they started worrying about, okay, are other aliens going to come and help from other bases that are underground and can get here quickly on these trains? And they started coming. So they had to make a decision, which humans are we going to rescue? Because some of them were in no condition to leave that place, because they had been tortured and mutilated and just, traumatized so bad they couldn't rescue not everybody. And it was like, which ones do we take? So that was a horrible decision that they had to make, to leave some of them. And
how
I guess
how did they get the people?
All those people, yeah,
out? What method did they use to get them out?
Well, he doesn't even really describe that. I guess they went to where they were being held captive, and I'll have to ask him, because it doesn't really the report doesn't really describe, if they had to go to the different cages and unlock each cage. I don't know. So again, I have to ask him a lot more questions before I go back there and speak next year. And see if he'll tell me, because he can't tell me everything that went on there. Because like he said, when they edited it, they left out hundreds of pages that they didn't even want the Joint Chiefs of Staff to see. But so I don't know exactly how the rescues happened. I just know that they rescued 3,500 people. They took them to different places and tried to either like brainwash them or mind wipe them so that they could hopefully reintroduce them back to society. So,
wow.
Right.
So Joanne, if you could just find one of these people, it would be so, finding one of these rescued victims would be really cool. It would make so much, it would really be useful. I just wonder if anyone's listening that was at Dulce or knows someone that is, please let JoAnn know.
Thank you. Well, I know the report mentioned somebody named Charlene Tilton as having been a victim, and she had, I guess, come forward at some point. I don't know where she is these days or if she's even alive, but that's the only name of a victim that I remember in here without going through it again. And I met somebody at the conference, and I'm not going to say who because I don't have permission to say who, but has weird memories of maybe she had been there, or maybe she had just had other abduction experiences, later on. It sounds, probably more later on or something, but because not everybody remembers, and you wouldn't want to remember. And like I said, the military officers were traumatized to try and decide who to take with them and who to get out of there. So,
Wow.
yeah. And
So
at
some
one
of these people had been created there, correct? Did I get that correct?
I don't know if any of the people they rescued were those kind of things. I think it was more like the women who were being used and tortured and used as sex slaves, and like the people, because now this is gory, but hopefully there's no children listening. Some of the women, they cut off their arms and attached them to milking machines, and that was their sole purpose there, to just continually create milk for the aliens to use for whatever solution they were creating. And you probably, I don't know that they would have rescued those. I mean, some of them, the report doesn't necessarily get into all the gory specific details on the condition these people were in to make it easy for the rest of us. Just imagine your worst nightmare, and that was probably happening there. So
and so you told part of the story to this audience. Well,
I told the highlights.
Is there anything?
Go ahead. Say that again.
Is there anything other parts of the story to tell us?
Well, I know there's, and I need to go and reread other parts because I often skip over stuff that because I try to do the highlights because you usually only have an hour, and I don't even know if I took an hour because I knew the basic highlights of the story, and I haven't given the talk for years, and I never created a PowerPoint for it before until this year. But now, it's like people there, for example, the report talks about, and I don't have time, you don't want to listen to me flip through the pages, but it talks about different UFO related or alien related projects. So like they're talking about Operation Gas Buggy and stuff. And, I hadn't even really scoped on the fact that happened right there in New Mexico, not far from Dulce, and they exploded a nuclear bomb right, not far from there, relatively close. And they were, I'm looking at the page. It says they were exploring the use of nuclear blast to build harbors, dams, highways, and to stimulate oil and gas production. Now, when you drive through this area as you're driving, because I flew to Albuquerque and I drove north to Dulce, and it's pretty, you pass through a couple of small towns, but once you get on the Indian reservations and stuff, there's not much out there, and it's pretty barren. It's beautiful, but it's barren. There's not a ton of towns, and there's not a million gas stations. There's one or two casinos every now and then, and I got lost at one point, but then I got turned around, so that was okay. But there's single oil derricks strategically placed all over the place there, and they're all painted green, so they kind of blend in with the landscape. And I was asking my friends up there, the hosts and stuff, like, well, I see all these oil derricks. Yeah, they drill for oil and natural gas here. And it's like, oh, okay. But most of the people I talked to were very aware of this project or Operation Gas Buggy, where they were setting off nuclear devices. And one guy was thinking, well, that's why the cattle mutilations, it was really because the animals were suffering from radiation. And he did say that, the cancer rate has gone up there due to, and this, these things happened, it looks like back in the late 50s.
Yeah.
So there were other things. So those are things I need to bring more details about. And I want to share more details about this. I mentioned, okay, these are the kinds of aliens that were there just by name. I didn't go into their descriptions like I do in other talks. Well, next time I go, I will give bigger descriptions. Here's what they look like. Here's what their life is like. Here's what they're like. I just didn't know. I was kind of added at the last minute because this lady didn't know me. And I said, oh, how about, think about me speaking next year. And she said, no, come and speak this year and you can speak at our reception. And so people were sitting down for dinner and I got to speak. It was great. So wow. I'm glad I didn't have to wait a whole year to get there. So, yeah.
Hey, Joanne, who was the Raptor fellow that came in to help that Mark knew?
Prince Naga.
Prince Naga, how large?
How large are the Raptors? Because they are generally in a running stance, so they might only be 3 or 4 feet high at their hips. But if they stood upright, they're 7 to 9 feet tall. So, yeah, they look like, they are they evolved from velociraptors of the dinosaur ages. So they've got a long snout and very sharp teeth, and they have the ability they have ESP abilities, and some of them can speak human languages, and they're very good military. I don't want to call them people, but they're very good military troops. And now there are several thousand of them here on Earth now, but they have a huge empire out in space. So, yeah. So Prince Naga came here in the early 50s and met Mark's dad. So they've known them for a very long time.
They have the tiny hands. How do they build things? How do they get into
I don't think they're as tiny as you think. Their arms look, kind of like a T-Rex. Their arms do look small, but they have opposable claws, and so they're very flexible. And I don't know how they build things, but they can do a lot with their claws. Their legs are very powerful and strong because they're built for running. They run and hunt, and they run to pounce on their enemies. Things like that. They have kill claws on their feet, and they can gut something in just a matter of seconds. But you don't want to take them for granted about how limited we think they are. But they're also not. They're very technologically savvy, but they often will. They'll borrow. I don't want to say steal, but they borrow or steal somebody else's technology. So it's not like necessarily, they're inventing everything and creating everything they want to use. They'll maybe borrow somebody's spacecraft and then figure out how to use it and that kind of stuff. Because I would say they're more military, but they also are very highly educated, and they have a great opera system. They portray their military victories. They create beautiful operas, apparently, and so they're artistic, and they're brilliant.
So they sing. Do their voices
they do sing.
sound?
Apparently, they sing and they create fabulous operas. And Mark has had operas written about him and his best friend that was a raptor, and some of their victories. So, yeah, he's a hero, and not only the human. He's a hero in other places.
What the Andromedans say is that at one point after Lemuria was sunk by the Atlans, and most of the reptilians who were here went underground, and finally they had the Council of Hatona in Andromeda, where they decided that the species of reptilians that was on Earth was free of the Draco Empire, and was going to contribute to the genetics of the proto-humans that each of the skyfaring peoples got to work on, and each tried to put their genes to dominate the others. But the reptoids, who were under this independent princess who had broken away from the Draco Empire, basically they control the brain stem, which is survival and being able to defend oneself and being able to figure that kind of strategic stuff out.
Well,
and Nagas was the name of this. And so when you had a guy named Prince Naga, the Nagas is the main tribe that was in the Indian subcontinent, and
right.
It sounds like the royalty.
Well, the raptors, it's funny because their empire is called the Draconian Empire, but they are not related at all to the Dracos who originated in space. The raptors originated here on Earth. They left the planet millions of years ago to colonize space. And they thought, because of time, space, continuum, warpy, whatever, Mark can explain the science way better than I can. But because of how things work out in space and time, they thought they'd been gone for maybe just a few thousand years or maybe a few hundred years. They've been gone for millions of years. And, 65 million years ago, an asteroid hit the planet and destroyed pretty much everything. And some of their, beings had been left. They had a base on the moon and on Mars, and some had gone underground. Well, those guys survived, but they evolved into a more human-looking a reptilian that we now call reptoids, which are responsible for much of the terrorist activity on this planet. But they still have their 3 toes. Most of them don't show a tail. They look way more human. They don't have the long muzzle that the raptors do. They're basically enemies of the raptors. They are also out in space, as are the raptors. But like now, the Dracos and some other reptilian species, they originated in space, and they're not related to, even though their empire is also close in proximity to maybe the raptor empire. They're not friends, and they're not at all alike. So, and I don't know much about the other reptilian species that are out there, but the reptoids, raptors, they originated here on Earth. And the raptors are only 20 genetic markers from us humans.
Right. So we're all related on some level, because we have all these beings that were created originally in space, in other planets, other whatever. But there has been a great billions of years diaspora spreading throughout the galaxies and the universe. So this is a long journey. And so we don't even know everything. We're trying to piece that together.
Right.
It'd be great to get all that from Mark, if he knows some of that. We know that Stuart Swerdlow knows the history going back to basically the first sentient beings and the forms they were incarnated in, and they were what, the Lyrans and the
there was a peaceful Lyran empire. They were pastoral people, but they had a high civilization. The Dracos said surrender, and they didn't surrender, and they blew up.
So
the
Dracos and the Lyrans, they were humanoid and reptoid. So those seem to be the two basic.
Well, reptoid is being used a little bit differently here.
Well,
they were reptilians.
They were humanoid and reptilian, two primary species.
Well, then the reptilians made an allegiance with the Wolverines, and they learned how to hollow out asteroid bodies, and that's how they blew up Maldek. They took most of the surface air and water off of Mars, although most of the Martians in the Maldek underground, and drew off the water off of Earth as this Death Star passed by, and so it rose Lemuria.
Right. I don't want to go into this whole thing. Right. I want to get with because I want to get JoAnn's version. So, do you have any idea from Mark's information how the we got to be here? Because from my understanding, Stuart Swerdlow was told the theory of the history of the universe when he was in Montauk, an underground institution, military. So I just wondered if anything was told to Mark, or if he's conveyed it to you, or he just doesn't know.
And as we know, he doesn't tell me everything, but and there's still a lot he cannot talk about because of his U.S. secrecy oath. So we're blessed with what he has talked about, but he's not breaking any of the laws he's not supposed to break as far as that kind of stuff. Right. What I will say is, we've talked about, he does believe in like a Big Bang Theory type of thing. He has said that there was some form of us humans on the planet when the raptors left. He has also said in this very long report he's writing about a conference that took place in Iran in 1971, one of the lovely cat species that was at the conference, she is an archaeologist. So she was going around, especially like the Middle East and the Sinai and Egypt and stuff. She was going around looking for evidence she's always looking for evidence that when her species has visited here, because they're scientists and all that kind of stuff. But you had, by the time of this conference, you had at least, I think, 9 species who were all saying, we created the humans, we created the humans, we created the humans. So she wanted to get some evidence and take to the conference and say either you're all wrong or this one's right or whatever. And because I don't have the part of the report that actually talks about the actual conference, but he has told me that she concluded that no one species created the humans. Several species have like helped enhance us so that we have various qualities. But, you know, lovely Contessa Leona discovered that no one species created us. So, you know, hopefully that put an end to that argument at that conference, but I don't have that part to read yet.
Well, you're getting it. So that brings me to my next question is, you talk to Mark continually. You visit him and you get information.
Right.
What's the latest that Mark is telling you that we can hear about?
About anything in particular or just anything in general?
All the disclosure, the secret space program.
The current political situation in the United States.
What are some of the thoughts? Does this have him by surprise, or was this all planned?
I often tease him because, you know, he is, even from prison, he is on the highest level of the Republican National Committee. That doesn't mean he thinks Trump is the best choice. So we often have a discussion about number 45 and the idiot things he's been doing recently. I think the most of the things that we talk about lately, and we have been talking more about the secret space program because, you know, we're all going to the MUFON symposium, and I'm going because it's about the secret space program this year, and it's like, people. So I'm going to have a booth there, you know, but because I want to hear what people are talking about. And I know Corey Good's speaking, and I know Bill Tompkins is speaking, but I need to, you know, hear what their take is because I usually don't listen to other people. But it's funny because a lot of stuff we're talking about these days is, you know, because Syria obviously has been in the news a lot, and he wrote a whole book, a short book for him about ISIS and how it came to power, and the reptoids who are backing ISIS. And like I said, the reptoids are often involved with terrorist activity. They have a huge base in Africa, and if they have another one on Earth, I'm not sure where it is. But they, you know, sometimes if you hear about a mall shooting, it could be them. It's not necessarily humans. You know, you don't always see the terrorists involved. They're certainly involved with what's going on in Syria and Iraq right now, and why they're destroying so many beautiful treasures, because that's even, you know, maybe, I don't know why, because, you know, it's Muslims destroying, I mean, the human element of this, the Muslims are destroying their own treasures, but also the reptoids, for some weird reason, want to destroy evidence that maybe they've been there or other aliens have been there. You know, their main agenda is to control us and make us slaves anyway. So, you know, they've been very responsible for the destruction. They tend to use human fronts. So right now it's ISIS. But, you know, seems like most of Syria is destroyed, and lots of people have disappeared. And yes, a lot of them have gone to different countries as refugees, but a lot of them have been shipped off planet. So,
right.
You
that
know,
might be what's these wars. It's a front to have people disappear and then they get taken, and we're getting stories about that as well, that they're taken to other planets and they're used in the military to fight aliens. They're used as slave labor. They're used as sex slaves.
Food.
Yeah, we're a commodity in the universe, the whole slave trade, and we're valuable.
We heard that after New Orleans, that a lot of the people from the poor black neighborhoods, like 6,000 of them, disappeared from the FEMA camps, and they're in the slave camps up base now.
Right. And now, you know, our attention is drawn to North Korea, and it's kind of, it reminds me of Syria. So the nutcase running North Korea is in cahoots with our friends that are, you know, terrorizing Syria.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about Antarctica?
Pardon me?
We heard Tompkins. I read Tompkins' book, I guess. You read it too?
Mark's probably been.
Antarctica apparently has a huge reptilian base. I'm not sure which variant. Reptilian. And then they've got the Nazi base, and then they've said that they've located Homo capensis, the humanoids with the large skulls, and apparently they were flash frozen or put into a kind of stasis. So we're finding different species. There's one that's they call what do they call that? Gilgamesh. He's got red hair, very handsome fellow. You can see clearly what he looks like, and they said, well, he's not dead. He's in a stasis type of situation, and the stories are out that they revised him. That guy looks like a total human, but he's tall, very tall. Probably Anunnaki. So we have the Homo capensis. We had stories of the reptilians in Antarctica. The Nazis went there. What's Mark's take on that, and your take on all that?
Here's what I know about the Antarctic. The Nazis went there as World War II is coming to an end. They have a huge city base there with a very large, well, at least a definitely a dimensional portal. After the war, Mark's dad was part of the Operation High Jump, where Admiral Byrd went to the South Pole to deal with aliens and the Nazis. The Nazis are still there now, but definitely in the mid 70s. For example, the Nazis were working with some form of reptilian. I think it's like a rogue faction from the Raptor Empire, and they were putting together like tectonic weapons and going to set off a series of earthquakes to like destroy various civilizations. And then the Raptors, those Raptors wanted to like take over and create a slave race and supposedly let the Nazis be the overseers. Well, that was never going to happen. Anyway, so there was this is 1976, you had a huge earthquake in China. Mark's dad and top secret troops went down to the Antarctic to deal with those people. And once the humans got there and the Nazis realized they were, friends with the wrong group, they stopped being allies, and I think they realized that the Raptors that were there were not going to be their friends. Anyway, so Mark's dad was doing hand-to-hand combat with, a big military Raptor there. He killed him. Over China, you have two-dimensional portals opening up with all kinds of spacecraft coming through because it was an invasion fleet. So you had the earthquake. You had a bunch of people scooped up to be taken out to space as, whatever. And Mark was in charge of this battle over China. So we were victorious in both places. So I know Mark and his dad have both been to the base in Antarctica. And also, as we're all finding, there are things being discovered there. And I think Mark said recently that, once upon a time, the Antarctic was like a jungly place. It wasn't always ice covered. And we know there's lakes there. And, he said recently that I go, well, so why are so many people going down there for meetings? And, why are these big politicians going down there? He goes, well, it's a great place for a secret meeting, because you're less likely to be bugged and followed, and all the news people can't go down there. And so it's a great place for a secret meeting. Now, in the early 80s, when we thought there was a Falklands War, that had something to do with aliens, not necessarily at the Antarctic, but up by Argentina, where that all took place. So there's been a lot of activity going on in that part of the world. So, and that whole...
Yeah, I talked to a person who went in Tierra del Fuego into huge caverns that were hot with lakes and rocks that had phosphorescent growth on them, and very beautiful under them. And I also, as I studied they were Norwegians, a guy and his dad that got swept in to a river that was moving toward the pole in the North Pole. They spent 2 years with giant people that spoke a sort of Swedish Germanic language.
Really?
Like 16 tall. They described all this. And then I also found some Germans that had been there from the 1560s who had taken shelter in the caves. And through the years, they started a whole bunch of underground cavern towns that were all connected by tunnels. They wound up coming up, just like the Norwegians in the South Pole. And there's a place called Bodland, evidently, where there's a sovereign king. And what we hear is that the modern descendants of the Neo-Germans from New Schwabenland aren't trying to conquer the world anymore because they already did. Alan Dulles broke over.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent news story, and I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
Hey folks, you got the Nighthawk here. Do you have a favorite host? Well, imagine if you will having all the broadcast shows from 2013 to listen to anytime you want. Awesome deal, huh? Anyway, so stop by freedomslips.com and order the entire 2013 library of your favorite host for just $30. Not only do you help with the station funding to keep us on the air, you also help the host because they get half of the net on every order. Also, we have Revolution Radio's all-time favorite shows all on one disc. The details are really broad, so you'll have to visit the website and go look at the details yourself. It's, again, www.freedomslips.com/season2013.htm. And get your favorites. First come, first serve, 7 to 21 days for delivery. Thank you. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps, including me. Later.
We've got to stop them! They're going to kill us all!
Hello, my name is Mr. Rowe. I am the host of Reality Extraction on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I utilize logic, intellect, and magic to methodically autonomize, vivisect, analyze, examine, study, scrutinize, and extract an essence of reality from a fog of illusion and confusion. You can find me on Studio B every Thursday at 1700 hours Pacific Time. That's 8 p.m. Eastern. No topic taboo, no subject too strange. I strive to take a neutral standpoint during the dissection of the topic at hand. That's Reality Extraction with Mr. Rowe on Revolution Radio.
Most guys freeze. That's your cerebral cortex looking for an answer it doesn't have.
See? Even your brain knows you're screwed.
The body's filling with adrenaline right now, whether you know it or not. Your heart's beating fast. It's getting a little harder to breathe. The neurobiological system is telling it to run, but your knees are too weak to move.
Fear is not real. The only place that fear can exist is in our thoughts of the future. It is a product of our imagination, causing us to fear things that do not at present and may not ever exist. That is near insanity. Do not misunderstand me. Danger is very real, but fear is a choice. We are all telling ourselves a story.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. 100% listener-supported radio. Reporting to danger. Unafraid. Right here. where information never sleeps. Revolution Radio.
Enjoy your extra big-ass fries.
You didn't give me no fries. I got an empty box.
Would you like another extra big-ass fries?
I said I didn't get any.
Thank you. Your account has been charged. Your balance is 0. Please come back when you can afford to make a purchase.
No.
I'm sorry you're having
Come
trouble.
on. My kids are starving.
Thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we believe in freedom of ideas, freedom of speech, but above all, we believe in freedom of existence through self-reliance. This station is 100% listener-supported, and as a fundraising promotion, I have a kick-ass free gift for a $100 donation. 35,000 seeds. 25 years in the freezer. Long-term storable, 54 different varieties. So if food prices go crazy, the shit hits the fan, or if you just want to save tons of money every year by creating your own food like I do, grab our seed pack special. Just look for the banner on the homepage at freedomslips.com. Don't be a statistic. Don't be part of the problem. Be part of the solution. We need, as humans, to start taking care of ourselves and not depending on the megacorps to provide unhealthy, nasty food. Included in this package is also a DVD with 900 survival and off-grid living documents and the offline home canning how to do everything website all on the DVD. So when you're growing all that food, you know how to can it, store it, preserve it, etc. with all these documents. So thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I hope that you will pick up this package and start learning to be free. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps and freedom is one seed that needs to be planted.
What we do in life, it goes in eternity.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
You need some more speed records in this day and age. You need coverage.
Coverage? Oh, you mean them little root weevils that crawl around popping off cameras in your face?
Those root weevils write history.
Many of you know that quote by Jack Nicholson in A Few Good Men. You can't handle the truth. Well, you can, and Event Horizons will give you those truths. So when you're mad as hell and not going to take it anymore from that memorable scene in Network, you'll know just what to do. We will draw you in and become your news addiction at Event Horizons. Join us Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to noon Eastern Time at freedomslips.com at Revolution Radio. Our world team members are Dennis Fetcho, John Ilias, David Dunger, Hyla Cass, MD, Melanie Bridgton, Jim Mars, Carla Harris, John Trallo, Maria Payan, Christopher Husser, DODDS, Jonathan Orchard, and me, your anchor, Dr. Robin Falco.
If you decide not to volunteer, it will not be held against you in any way.
Sounds dangerous.
It is.
Very dangerous. Count me in.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And I am your host, Janet Kier Lessin, with the incredible Dr. Sasha Alex Lessin. Bloop, bloop, bloop. And he doesn't want me to say this, but today's his birthday. Yay!
Happy birthday.
Sasha's birthday. Yay!
Hey, thank you.
So before we get back to our show, I'd like to remind everybody to please go over to that donation button and make your donation, $1, $5, $15, $20, whatever you can spare. We greatly appreciate it, and we thank you very much for your donation. Matt Peter says, happy birthday. And make a special donation in honor of Sasha's 77th birthday, 77 in 2017. Wow, a lot of sevens. But he's younger than all of us, so don't let those numbers fool you. Matt, how are we doing with our fundraising this month?
We have 731 and we need 2650. So please donate. It's about a third of the month away through, and we could use it. We're pushing the archives. We upload about 36 hours in a 24-hour period. You can't listen to them all unless you're a time traveler. And if you are, Janet wants to talk to you.
Yes.
Revolution Radio is really the future. I'm telling you, this station gets the truth across. We're not controlled by media or advertisers or the government. This is really worth contributing to.
Yay. So, Joanne, we only have less than an hour, and we could probably have you on for 10 hours and still not go over everything. Where would you like us to journey with you? Because you could take us to the cosmos and back. What's the most burning share, the information that you think our listeners are going to want to hear?
Somebody is peeling rubber outside. Weird. They don't get that wild and crazy in my neighborhood very often. What would I like to share? That's a good question. Well, first I'm going to do a little publicity because like you, I'm going to be at the MUFON Symposium in a couple weeks, to have a booth and share, lots of my reports. So that's coming up. And mid-August, I'm going to be down in LA speaking for the Orange County MUFON group on, I think that's Wednesday the 16th and Tuesday the 15th. It's some kind of paranormal UFO group, so that'll be fun too. So that's exciting, and I'm always open for more speaking engagements. So, I have plenty to share. So
there's a big conference in Yelm the last weekend of the month. Are you busy?
There's what?
Yelm, Washington. There's a big UFO symposium, and they were asking if I knew anybody else that might want to come. Are you busy?
Well, that's my anniversary, so I should probably stay home. That's our wedding anniversary, so I probably should stay here.
All right.
Listen, you keep alluding about the peculiarities of your life being married to a person in prison. Could you tell us a little bit of how he got there and what that's like?
Okay, well, let's finish. Where else are you going to be this year and next year? And then we can answer that question.
I don't know about next year yet. I've been putting out feelers. I do know I'm going back to Dulce next summer. So that's fine. Okay. But I don't know where else yet. So I've
seen your presentation, JoAnn, and I'm always in awe of you're very detailed. You're very entertaining. JoAnn puts on a good show, and it's all information that you really need to take in. And it does take a while to wrap your head around it, because it's like, oh my God, we have been lied to.
I'll tell you though, the people in Washington, please give them my name maybe for next year, because then I could at least plan ahead. But I'm already gone. I was just gone, and I'm going to be gone another weekend this month. So I don't want to be away from him that many times, too many weeks in a row, because they just got off like a 3 or 4 week lockdown. So there were several weeks where we could not visit. So that was difficult. So let me tell you about Mark and being in prison. Like I said, in 1982, doing top secret work, he always had to have a cover business. So at one point he had a film company, and these were always very legitimate businesses, but he had a film company in LA. So he was, filming like different things for different TV shows. He published a magazine. He ran a magazine that went up and down the coast back in the 70s. And then when his trial happened, he had like a remodeling, not a full-blown construction company. They weren't like building houses from the ground up, but they were remodeling was their specialty. And so he was remodeling something or doing an addition like at a friend's house. And I mean, it turned out that the friend who he'd known for a while was dealing drugs and filming child pornography, but Mark didn't know any of that. But anyway, the kids that worked for Mark killed the guy, dumped the body, said Mark planned the whole thing and helped them dump the body. Well, I know, even though I can't prove it, but as a wife, I know in my gut that he was off on a mission that day, and he has at least agreed with me that that's what he was doing. He cannot tell me what he was doing or where he was. The people that he was with cannot corroborate that because it was all top secret. The government was not going to come in during his trial and say, excuse me, he was working for us that day. His dad told him, you will not say where you were, So as an honorable officer, he did not, provide his alibi. Otherwise, we wouldn't be where we are today. So it took a couple years, basically. He was arrested in July of 1982. His trial was like the spring of 1984. Then I think by June of 1984, he was convicted and put in prison for a life without parole. While the kid who did the murder got 25 to life. He's had several parole hearings, but never gets paroled. The other kid who was involved got full immunity for supposedly providing great evidence or testimony, even though it was all hearsay, because technically he said he was not there when the guy got killed. So blah, blah, blah. We now know that there's several like relatives or distant relatives of these kids that were involved, all have New World Order ties. So it's all circumstantial. There's no direct evidence to tie Mark to this crime. It was all circumstantial, but he can't provide his alibi that will get him out. And at this, all his appeals were denied. And so what you have to do at this point, they can't really, it's really hard to go back into court to prove innocence. So you either have to find ways to change the laws or to, and California is trying to do that a little bit, but you have to like find a way to do a habeas or something that finds the loophole in your trial. And, that all takes a lot of money that we don't have, and we don't have a lawyer in our pocket. And, so we try.
Can the governor pardon him?
The governor could pardon him if he wanted to. I tried that with Arnie, and he was told not to pardon Mark. We are going to try, maybe not a pardon, but there's another way that the governor can release him. And we're probably going to try that. So we'll see if that works. So we're trying, whatever we can think of without having to find, because there's no way we're going to come up with a few $1 million to go back to court, and there's no guarantee that would work. So, that's just, I don't make enough money to even go even anywhere near that. So that's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
And there's no guarantee, you could spend a couple $1 million on a trial and there's no guarantee you'd win. So, when
in this process did you meet Mark?
So after he'd been in 1997, my roommate came home one day and her husband is in prison for, something he did. And she came home and said, oh, I met this really nice guy. He's really smart. He's a friend of my husband's. His mom was visiting. Do you want to meet him? And I'd already been to the prison a couple times to meet, visit with her husband. And I was also visiting an inmate. So the visiting part, prison didn't scare me anymore. And so I said, sure, I'd like to meet a smart guy. Most of my boyfriends or ex-husbands, weren't that bright. And Mark is Mark is uber smart. He's like the smartest guy I know. And so we started writing in September of 1997. We finally were able to meet in November. And, we courted for 5 years with letters. We write pretty much every day, and very few phone calls, but occasionally a phone call. And if he was close enough, I would visit every weekend. If he was farther away, like he's been in Southern California a couple times, so those times I would only go once a month. But we courted for 5 years, and then we got married at Salinas Valley Prison in 2002, July, on my birthday in 2002. So
when's your birthday?
July 26th.
Oh,
we're coming up on our
birthday.
15th wedding anniversary, so that's pretty exciting. That's a big one. I've never been married to anybody like more than 2 or 3 or 4, maybe 5 years, but it wasn't a happy 5 years, and we'd already split up after 2. So 15 years is a big milestone for me.
Yes. So I'm going to ask the question: do they allow conjugal visits?
Well, the happy news is that the governor has just given them back to life inmates with life in prison. So the answer will be yes. At the end of August, we finally get our honeymoon.
Wow!
Congratulations! Wow.
Thank you. Yeah, we have a date. You have to apply, and if you're a good inmate, then you get approved, and you have to apply. And so we applied, and then we had to wait for a date. So the end of August, we have our 2 days.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah.
I'm so happy for you. Sasha and I met in 97 as well. That was a good year.
Yeah, it was a good year.
Yes. So,
yeah, and it was weird because his dad had just died. And his dad died 6 months before we met, and my mom died, in February of 1998. So, we were like between 2 parents dying. So it was, a weird, kind of a hard way to start a relationship, but it did help having each other to, grieve together. So that was nice.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
So then, have you, what are you doing with all this information? I know we spoke at one of the conferences that you're working on getting a book or some books together, and I'd love to help.
I know. I have all these reports that he's written, and most of them are just, they're very basic looking. They're nothing's a pretty glossy book, and most of them I just make copies. But lately, I put the PDF on a CD and sell the CD. And then you just have to open up the document and print it yourself, because a lot of the stuff that he writes is really long, and it would be like a set of encyclopedias to print, even put them in a glossy book. So some of it, I don't know how we're going to do that, but I do have most of the reports on like a PDF. So I send them a PDF through Dropbox, or, some people still want a hard copy. One of the nice grandmas at the Apache reservation, needs me to mail her something because she doesn't, a lot of them, they all have cell phones, but they don't all use computers. So, so that was sweet. So I have a combination of things. I can send it to you digitally. I can put the PDF on a CD, and there are some shorter things, shorter reports that I should make into a pretty book. Yes. And people want my story and my part of all of this to be in a book. So, that's one of the goals that I have to work on. So
well, we'll talk at the MUFON Symposium.
Yes, we will.
Has Mark did Mark write some a fiction where in the fiction he really gives us some insights? What did he write? Could you tell our audience?
He's written several fictions. Some of them are mysteries. Some of them are historical fictions. The 2 that I published after we met, and then I started a publishing company. One is a cute story, which is it's kind of weird now that I know more about him, but it's called Tiffany and the Lowlifes. And I have 1 million copies left if anybody wants to buy one. But it's about a little rich girl in San Francisco who makes friends with like a middle class, or, we'll just say like a little middle class young boy, whose dad works underneath, like in the tunnels and stuff in San Francisco. So, maybe a maintenance worker or something who works under the city of San Francisco. And lo and behold, there's these, like Mark calls them subhuman creatures that live down there. And sometimes they, they're mischievous, and sometimes they remind me of like trolls in a fairy tale, but they decide they want to take over. So they start coming up from the underground, and the kids have to battle them a little bit. And you also have the little girl sees her grandma's ghost. So you got paranormal in there. And the subhuman creatures, I don't know if that was supposed to be aliens or if it's a satire or, something, a commentary on the homeless in San Francisco. I don't know. We've never had that total discussion. But, now that I know more about his alien information, it's like, well, maybe he's trying to tell us something. But
yes, I think so. And we heard we were being interviewed by a television program, and they wanted us to report on the underground cities or insulation or tunnels and the beings under there. And we said we don't know anything, but maybe Mark is saying something about what's really going on. What I wanted to get to, we have about a half an hour or less left to the show, is what is the structure of this human governments that we have on this planet? Are we involved with other extraterrestrial species on an ongoing basis, like the raptors and what other species? And what happens when we get it? I think we talked about this, an outside threat, what happens. There's some kind of system. Could you tell us what's really going on?
Sure. And before I do that, let me tell you about the other book that I published, because this relates to his case. He started a series of books called Imperial Marin. And I think even back when he was a teenager, he started a book that was Marin County, where I live, just north of San Francisco. It had a revolution. It broke away from the rest of the United States. So you had no taxes, no army. It was run by 3 kings, so a medieval feel, but they were environmentally sound, and, everything was environmentally sound. But you also had these like almost, I thought they're walking and talking animals that were part of the society. So it's like, okay, now that I understand him more, it's like, oh, okay, you've got aliens living here. That's cool. And you also had a weird religious zealot who was evil and kidnapping girls and stuff. So I've got, okay, now that reminds me of certain groups. And these kings had businesses off planet. They were mining. They had mining operations out in space. And a lot of his illustrations were of like maybe small spacecraft that they were using to go maybe out to their business or whatever. It's like, okay, these are things the military designed years ago, and he's had these drawings. So he's been in the loop about what the military's been doing for years, and it's funny how he like weaves them into his story. So it's all kind of fascinating. So yes.
Is he allowed to steal papers that he's written?
Pardon me?
Is he allowed to hand you stuff he's written?
No, he has to mail it out to me. So
he can.
Yeah, he's either handwritten stuff or he's typed it up. And then every now and then he used to send like parts of stories, or we call them stories, but parts of the reports he'd send in a letter. More often than not, he'll wait till he's allowed to mail a box home, and then he'll send lots of envelopes with different parts of the reports, and those are usually all typed, so that makes it easier on me, because I've got a couple of reports here that he gave me years ago that are still handwritten that I haven't transcribed into typed. But I now have Dragon Speak, so it's just a matter of time. Taking the time to do it. So what was your other question? Are we working with aliens? Yes, we are.
Which ones?
We've worked with the Raptors since the early 50s when his dad met Prince Naga. And if you want, I can tell that story. That's a lovely story.
Yes, we'd like to hear it.
Well, give us a rundown of who we're working with, and then tell us the Naga story.
Okay, so remind me to tell you that. I know we've worked with the Nordics. Nordics is an umbrella term for various human-looking species, but so I know we've had interaction with different Nordic species, and again, like in 1961 and 1971 were two big conferences that I know about. He was at the 61 one as a kid and saw hundreds of species. So you've got hundreds of species coming, either out of the ocean or from space or from other dimensions or whatever, and meeting with human leaders and creating treaties and things. So, they weren't always necessarily working together, but you also had a bunch of side deals going on. But they were working together to let's have a treaty. Like, do we let the humans go out to space? How much technology are we going to trade you for? Should we sell you our old spacecraft? This kind of thing. There were numerous aspects of it. They had the next one in 1971. So by then Mark was a young adult and working security. So definitely, I know we've worked with the raptors. We've worked with various cat species. There's a cool beetle, a very large beetle species that we've worked with. They've had something to do with like a gaseous species that, looks like a oily blob when it's by itself, but then looks like a big cloud when its community is together. Let's see, who else?
Wait. Can I just ask you about did the beetle want to hold your hand?
No.
Was the beetle were the beetles named after? It does not seem like an accident to me that the ETs have consistently interacted with the Moody Blues and other stars, and that beetles is not an accident.
No. Well, they're the ones Mark knew the most. They were called, because their group of them were called war beetles, because they helped like defend and did combat and stuff. They have like a queen, and they have like royalty, and they've got this cast of royal war beetles, and then like lesser beings for drones and worker things. And like the war beetles are like the size of a pickup truck. They're huge, and they have wings, and they can spit plasma. And the one Mark knew that was his friend was called Clicker. And lo and behold, there's a Clicker war beetle in some video game that's out there. I don't know which one, but my grandson knows.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow,
so
that's interesting.
Mark has worked with many different kinds over the years, and he's also been in battle against many different kinds over the years. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now I have a question. So Mark went to a meeting with all the species in 61 and 71. Do they continue on a 10-year basis? Was there one in 81, 91, 2001, and 2011?
Okay, I'll tell you. Okay, so they didn't have one in the 80s because of the Falklands War. And in the 90s, they had smaller ones, like the covers were the Kyoto Treaty Conference and other environmental conferences. So under covers of those, they would have these other, they would have smaller versions of these conferences. Then in, when was it? 2011? Yeah, I guess it was 2011 when Kate and William got married in England. And right after their wedding in Paris, you had one of those G8 or G something meetings. And basically that was the cover, or maybe they had that, but they also had one of these interstellar interspecies conferences. So
okay.
Yeah, so they are still going on. And I don't know.
They did have a conference. What happened with what was the reason why the Falkland Wars made it so they didn't have a conference?
Well, just because the Falklands War was going on right about the time they would have had a conference. And it was alien related, so they couldn't stop and do a conference. So I don't know a lot about that because he doesn't talk much about the Falklands War. So
Alfred Weber says basically there's a portal there, and it's vital. And there was the black goo, which is I guess some kind of programming virus kind of. Yeah, that was there, and some of it was brought back to England, and everybody in the lab started dying, and it sounds like something really important to at least that M15 knew about and was going after, like we went after stuff in Iraq.
Yeah, Miles Johnston talks a lot about the black goo, and Carrie Cassidy and Mark have talked a little bit about it. And he has, basically validated what Miles has been saying for several years, that it's an artificial intelligence thing, and it is kind of weird, and it kind of gets in you and like takes over. So. But he hasn't talked a lot about the Falklands War. And so that's why we didn't have one then. Now, I think the next big conference is scheduled for 2031. There's a gap for some reason. I don't know if there's one for like 2021, but there, 2031, there's I don't know the exact date or anything, of course, but I think that, and this is kind of funny because we're all working on a grassroots disclosure effort, but that is when the governments have decided they will set a date for disclosure. Not that it will be anytime soon, right about there, but they will set a date for disclosure.
They'll set a date for it.
They'll set a date for setting a date.
Yeah.
They'll set a date for when they'll do disclosure. It's like, well, by then we're all going to know anyway.
Right. I think we're already in disclosure. Everybody's talking about it. They'll be the ones that stupid. Like, you don't believe this? Yeah. Okay, tell us about the Raptor meeting meeting Mark.
Okay. Well, in 1952, when Mark might not have even been conceived yet. I don't know the details, but he wasn't born until the following year. August of 1952, the officers, there used to be an Air Force base like right north of me, like 15 or 20 minutes north, a very active base, probably since before World War II, but it was very active during World War II. Anyway, August of 1952, the officers and their wives were up at the officers club pool, because you can't have the officers and the enlisted men at the same pool. Anyway, and like 6 to 8 silvery flying saucers come right into the base within perfect view of everybody, and the alarm goes off, and all the men have to go down to the hangars and leave the women there, probably standing there with their mouths open. And the base commander's wife is telling the women, okay, now ladies, yes, we all just saw that, but we're not, we're not going to say anything, and mum's the word type of thing. Anyway, the guys go down to the hangars. Most of them come out in their jets. And right about that time, the Air Force had several flying saucers built for them by a company called Avro up in Canada. And there were 3 bases on the West Coast and 3 bases on the East Coast that each had a squad of flying saucers. Well, of course, with my father-in-law being stationed at Hamilton Air Force Base, they had a squad. And he comes out of his hangar, not in his normal jet that his wife is used to seeing him in, but in a flying saucer. And they had been, and they had tested, like his grandfather had developed an antimatter engine or propulsion system. So they'd been testing it in the flying saucer. So that part's cool too. But, the guys all go off, and I don't know if they had any kind of skirmish. It's funny because Mark has shared things with me that he can. This is way more than his dad would have ever told him or his wife. And, if Mark wasn't directly involved, his dad wasn't going to talk about it. So it's not like his dad wrote things down. But anyway, so all the men come back eventually, and I think Mark's dad was probably one of the last guys to come back. So all the women are, and then all the men have come back, and then one flying saucer comes back, and out walks Prince Naga. And at this time, he was sent here as an ambassador to our planet because the Empress felt like, she should let him try making friends with the humans, because up until then, we weren't necessarily their friends and they were still eating us and whatever. And he spent several days there with several military leaders, teaching them more about space and teaching them stuff about like what the Greys maybe not have told them. And just all kinds of things. I don't know all the details, but lots of cool stuff. And Naga and my father-in-law became really good friends. Later, Mark met Naga when he was, young. And so Naga and his factions have worked with the military for years. There was a time, I think in the early 80s, where they left the planet because of all the threats against them. And this is probably right around the time, Mark was arrested and, and in jail and all that. So, but Mark, and this is documented probably in the newspaper and definitely in Richard Dolan's one of his first books. But Mark was born in June 28th, 1953. 2 months later to the date, a contingency of flying saucers or some kind of spacecraft came into the Marin Water District, which is not far from my house. And the wonderful scene in The Lion King where they hold up the baby and present him to everybody. Well, the Raptors did that kind of ceremony with my husband when he was exactly 2 months old, because that's when they named their children in their society. So he was held up by the Raptors. They all approved of him. He has a little scar on his wrist. He's a blood brother to the Raptors. And later, when he was older and met one of Naga's sons, Crag, they became best friends and did many missions together until Crag died in battle. And Mark knows one of Naga's daughters, who is now the Empress, and she, they were all buddies. So, yeah, it's amazing who his friends are, and I swear his best friends are not human. And sometimes I tease him when he gets a look on his face. I go, "You're looking a little raptorish." But he's just funny, and he can speak Raptor. He can speak other alien languages, but he's quite fluent in Raptor. So he's very well educated about their society, and that's why I have so much information about them in particular. But I love talking about him.
Have you ever met any of his friends? Has he ever arranged a meeting?
No, because that's against the treaties. There are treaties that have been in place since that 1961 conference that there will be no open civilian contact with the aliens. They'll get in trouble. We'll get in trouble. It'll be a big mess. And besides, most of us, even if we wanted to, meet them and talk to them, most of us don't know how to communicate with them properly, and we might say the wrong thing and cause an international incident. Just by accident, we might say something stupid because we don't know any better, and it could cause an intergalactic incident, and we'd all be toast.
What does Mark think about all the experiencer contactees? What's going on from his perspective?
I don't think he has any problem with that. I think he must be happy that more information is coming out, and people are, I'm just assuming, he's not sitting around saying, "Oh, I wish they wouldn't talk," or "I wish they wouldn't share their experiences." And some people that he hears about, he says, yeah, they're right on. And some people he doesn't think they have it quite right, or he thinks they might have planted memories, stuff like that. But, he's not, putting anybody down for sharing a specific experience, especially like if you've been abducted and that kind of stuff, because those are traumatic experiences.
Do you think if there is some major disclosure that Mark will be free at that time?
That's what Simon Parks told Carrie. There could be, some major incident, but basically the time frame that he mentioned to her has already passed. But so I don't know if there's going to be a major disclosure incident where that would, enable Mark to be free. The civilian government does not want him free. I think his military friends would be happy if he was out, because then he'd probably go back to work, and he would like that. Mark's never going to be totally content just to sit and teach or just sit at home and putter in the garden. He's always going to want to have his hand in things, especially if it's going to save women and children. So yeah, there's that. But I think,
I'm hoping, I'm wishing that someday he's free. I feel very sad that someone has spent their life inside a prison behind bars, and he doesn't deserve it. So
no, and what's interesting? Go ahead. I was
in a way, he's symbolic of all of us being in a prison too. He's in a physical prison,
but we are in a invisible prison of conditioning and programming.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now there is, a minor piece of hope, because right now, in our state legislature here in California, there is a bill called SCR 48, and it's passed the Senate, and now it's up against the Assembly this next week. So that if you were convicted of murder, but perhaps you weren't the person who actually did the murder, maybe you drove the getaway car, maybe you were just there, whatever, then that could lop off your life without parole and make you eligible to start having parole hearings. Now, again, like I said, Mark was never there when the murder happened, and he did not help dump the body. But he would probably, he always said, I was sure that the kids had been up to something, and I tried to get them to talk to me and tell me what they did, because he knew his friend was a friend of his that disappeared. It's like died. He knew they did something, but they wouldn't tell him. And they were about to go dump a bunch of construction crap and stuff, and some of it the kids might have used things that were just like that, when they dumped the body. So Mark didn't want anything that could possibly tie him in any way. Not that he was guilty, but they probably used his stuff to dump the body, and so they got arrested as they were leaving the house for the dump. So he would probably say, yeah, sure, I'll admit to, I'll cop to being an accessory after the fact, if that'll, and if that'll get him out of prison. He would say that, I'm sure. And so this law, if it passes, that could actually help him in some way. But, that's a glimmer of hope. Yeah. So we're all hoping, if you're in California, please tell your assemblyman to support this SCR 48. So yeah.
Yay.
So who knows?
Wow.
In the meantime, you get me going around talking to everybody.
Well, someday it'd be great to see both of you together, because you certainly paved the way for this information to come out.
I want to hear Mark's voice too.
Yeah, it'd be nice to hear his voice.
I know. Maybe one of these days, Carrie keeps hoping that, he can call her and she can, quickly turn on a recorder, so at least she has his voice. You have to do that, like a collect call, and you have to do it, he never knows when he can make a call. So he'll just have to try and catch her at home one of these times. So who knows?
Oh, that would be interesting. Yes.
That would be fun. Yeah.
So imagine he's free. What would your life be like? Have you ever gone in future pace and imagine what will happen?
Oh, yeah. All the time. We think about what it would be like. Number one, he'd fix up the house. Do the things that I can't do here. Number two, we'd take long drives. We'd go visit all his grandchildren that he's never met. We'd go see all his kids, depending on what, if he's, you never know. Depends if it's a parole, you never know what your travel restrictions are, but so they might have to come here. Who knows? But yeah, I think that's first priority. He wants to meet all his grandchildren and see his children that he hasn't seen for 30 years. So
how many children does he have?
He has a lot.
Oh, he has a lot of children.
He has, let's just say, at least 16 children.
Wow.
Yeah. With various mothers, different mothers. Pardon me?
I won't ask.
Oh, you can ask.
How that came to be. Was it?
Are they all totally human?
Oh yeah. Well, the ones, yes, and yes, the ones here on the earth are totally human. He does have one that's not, that I know of.
Uh-huh. Was he? Did he just get around a lot, or was he?
He got around a lot,
Mormon
and
or Catholic or something?
It's not a Catholic thing because he's a pagan. He got around a lot, and usually when you're undercover and doing top secret work, and you have to go like establish like little bases, and not a full blown base, but a place to like use as your cover. It's always good to have a woman, and round out the picture. And, there's a woman in every port for him. So.
Wow.
But, the beauty of it
have any of his children come to see him? Have any of his children come to see him?
I think some of them came years ago. And, sometimes one might show up when he's, in the country on business and things, but his kids don't live here in the United States. So,
I see.
So it's not easy for them to get over here, but he's in contact with his kids. He put them through college. He's supported them. He has houses all over the place. So they live in the houses that he, bought over the years and fixed up and stuff. So he took care of his kids, and he's in contact with them, and he's in contact with his grandkids. So, he's got great relationships with them. So
wonderful.
Yeah.
Wow.
He's a better father than a lot of people.
So we're down to about, let's say, 10 minutes. What would you like to convey to our listeners that they should know?
Well, let's see. Did you, when we were at the UFO con in March, I don't know if you heard my talk in the main hall there about his training as a teenager.
No, go ahead. Okay. I wasn't able to catch a lot of things because I had things I was doing.
Yeah, that's right.
In opposition to everything I wanted to watch. But so, go ahead.
Yeah, so a fun thing that he had recently finished and sent me was that when he was still in high school, and he and several other humans, including Dean Martin's son, and this was 1970, 71. I think he graduated in 71. So it might have been like, the year before he graduated. Anyway, he was picked to go to England, and there's a famous big castle there on the eastern coast called Bamberg Castle, and it was used as a training facility for the Raptors military program. And they were training raptors and some humans all together, and maybe other species as well, to be basically involved in the raptor military. And so it was cool. So they had to go to all these classes, and they were doing physical training exercises. So they were, the raptors run all the time, so they were running a lot, and they were training in their cool spacecraft, really cool spacecraft, but they were using an older version. So by the next year or so, when he was in Iran, he got to use an even cooler Raptor spacecraft. But so then they went out to space as kind of a big, not kind of, it was a big test, and did a war game scenario, holographic war game, and they beat the enemy. So that was really cool. But they had, and this is where people think I'm crazy, I think, because I say things like, and as weird as it sounds, the aliens like to go on vacation. So and you can find cool images for these concept images on the internet, because I found one for my talk. Some of the aliens go on, there are cruise liners out in space, and the aliens, book a cruise and go around to the other planets and check out, the rings of Saturn and and so that's something they like to do. And some of them come here for vacation, but they like to go on vacation. And so I think the young cadets had passed this cruise liner, so it probably that's interesting. And they went to a different area, and then they found out after they'd done their war games that a kind of a not nice at all alien species had attacked that cruise liner. So being the knightly guys that they are, Mark said, we have to go save the passengers. And so I think there were nine aircraft in this group of cadets, and they all went and they attacked the species that was trying to board this cruise liner, and they had a space battle. And then I think they went back to maybe where their base was or where another base was. Anyway, so they went back to, and we're out by Jupiter and Saturn. We're way out in space here. And then they had another battle. So anyway, it all ended up good because Mark's still alive. But he brings that up and writes about it because it's this insect. I mean, it's an insect species called the trogs, and they're tall and they're nasty, and they come to Earth also and raid humans and things like that. They also do a lot of mining operations out in space. Well, ever since then, they have not liked Mark. So by the next year when he was in Iran, that was part of another big problem that they had to deal with. But so the Trogs don't like him, and but they saved the passengers of the cruise liner. So I loved that story. And what I brought with me, because if you've seen the movie Jurassic World and those beautiful raptors in that movie, and the scene where the human is riding the motorcycle through the forest or whatever while they're training and stuff, well, that's how Mark used to train with the raptors. He would ride his motorcycle in his leather bomber jacket, and they would run beside him and try to keep up, and they'd try to be in formation and stuff. So I took his leather bomber jacket with me to that conference and said, here, this jacket's got, if you tested it carefully, it could have some interesting DNA on it. I don't take that everywhere with me. I've only taken it to that one thing, but I wanted to show the prop and to show that, the guy in that movie looks a lot like my husband when he was younger. And, that's exactly how he trained with the raptors on certain, like when they needed to run and stuff. Sometimes he ran with them, but a lot of times he would ride his motorcycle and they would have to run along with him. So those are just some cool fun. I have actually fun stories about some of these alien species, mostly the raptors.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You said that Dean Martin's son, Dino, of Dino, Desi, and Billy, Dean Paul Martin, went to this training, which would make sense because he died piloting this jet. And so if he was training with them.
It was, I think, the son, though. Wasn't there a son that got killed by the side of the freeway or shot or something?
Oh, another son. Okay, it wasn't Dino.
I'm not sure which one it was, because I'm not sure. He might have mentioned.
Dino was born in 51. So if he was he might have been around the same age. I'll have to see. Anyway, he would have been a year older for your husband too, right?
This took place in 1970, I think, because it was the next year they were working in Iran. So I think this was in 1970, and but see, the other interesting thing is, and I know we're almost out of time, is a lot of these actors and different people have also doubled as agents for the government, especially in the 30s and 40s. A lot of the actors and Barry Goldwater and Tom Nix, they were all doubling as agents for the government because they didn't have a lot of agents, and they were rich and they wanted to do something adventurous. So but apparently
Reagan did it too. We have some pictures of him, Ronald Reagan sneaking behind a hedge to tell on all the liberals.
Yeah, Ronald Reagan was fully aware of all this stuff. So, fully aware.
Well, Dean had 8 children, so we don't know which one it was, but that was interesting.
I'll have to look and see if Mark names the one. But I know it's one that died, I think he was shot. I think it was the one that was shot alongside the freeway or something, but I could be getting it wrong. I know he was very sad when that particular son died, because now it turns out that they were training together. So, but
okay.
I'll have to look in the report and find out, because I don't know. Yeah, but we've got lots of stories.
lots of stories.
Yeah.
What's underneath Mark's story is that agents of the government committed criminal acts in sentencing him on false charges and keeping him in prison all these years, and that's a crime against humanity.
I know, but if you understand the military code of honor, you're not going to break your U.S. secrecy oaths. And it wasn't the government, the military, that put him in prison. It was a state offense publicly. So, it was not a military trial or anything. They didn't even bring up his military career. So it was not a military trial. It was not a federal trial. It's just a state of California murder trial. And again, like I said, he was told by his dad, you're not going to talk about what you were doing. It'll get you, it'll free you, but you're not going to talk about it, because that would have broke his U.S. secrecy oath. And he, his U.S. secrecy oath is, upon pain of death, you will not talk about these things. So.
Wow.
Yeah, it sucks, but it is what it is. And I applaud him for his sticking to his code of honor.
In philosophy, there was a guy named David Hume who wrote one of the most brilliant things ever written about religion, and he put it in a drawer and said, "Do not show this to anyone until after I die."
Oh.
And so I just, even though you might have a code of secrecy, there's what JFK wanted was after 25 years for information to be released.
Uh-huh.
That was his model. And when he started the Defense Information Agency, and that was its mandate, make everything that's safe for our, you've got to keep security, but everything beyond that should be released to the public.
Well, if Mark somehow mysteriously gets murdered while he's in prison, there is a plan in place to release all the stuff he's not sharing. I don't have access to that. It's not, I'm not part of that plan, but there are other people who've been instructed to do so. So we hope that will never happen.
Right.
So,
that's
we'd like
really
him to,
wise.
Yeah, we'd like him to be free and be able to come out and just have a normal life. So
that would be great.
It would be.
Okay, it's time for your website and your books and chance to advertise.
Yes.
Sure.
Do you have a website?
I do. It's Earth Defense Headquarters, www.edhca.org. So my email's there, my phone number's there, the list of products are there. I can send out hard copies, digital copies, whatever people want. And I'll be.
And I want to say, I really appreciate your chocolate. You give us everybody in the vendor rooms. JoAnn gives the best chocolate to everybody that comes in. So be sure to visit her in the vendor rooms.
I was going to try and get away with not doing that this month until Janet said, "Be sure to bring chocolate." So I will bring you some chocolate.
Oh, thank you. I like Hershey Kisses.
Okay.
Chocolate doesn't travel well in the air, in the plane.
I'll figure it out because I get in there very late at night. Okay. So.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
So we're not done yet, honey. Music has fun. But we got about. The music should come on any second now. So you're going to be at the MUFON Symposium.
Right. We're all going to have a good time.
And come see JoAnn. Have a long conversation with her. And we'll be there too.
Thank
Love
you.
and blessings. Aloha.
Aloha.
Thank
you. Bye.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.